Actually, you're going to get me first. My name is Todd Hill. I'm a landscape architect at DTJ Design in Atlanta, and I will be moderating today's afternoon session. And it is an amazing story, Hitesh and everything he's done. This is our third opportunity to collaborate together at ASLA. Mostly, it's always having to do with green hospitality, sustainable hospitality. We both, it's really important to both of us. And although our practices are very different, I have to say. So the way we're going to structure it this afternoon is into 5 sections. And the first section is going to be getting to know Hitesh himself. Second section will be more about getting to know HM Design and the philosophy of his firm. And then the third section will be about case studies. And there might be some dancing as far as I understand. And then section 4, we're going to be looking ahead in terms of the future of HM Design, and then we'll get into Q&A. So I think let's go ahead and just start off with section 1. And who are you?
Great question. I tell people I'm actually a person who has a soul from India, a heart from Kenya, and my body lives and works in Florida. So I'm really consider myself a world citizen. I grew up in a very humble beginnings in Nairobi, Kenya. 5 siblings, and not an easy life to begin with. So much so that my dad could not even afford the $2 that cost me to go to school, kindergarten school. So I missed out on all the Cinderella and Little Red Riding Hood stories.
So you have a really unique perspective on the contrast between Africa and the United States.
Sure. Some similarities, and yes.
It was sports important to you growing up in terms of helping you move out of that situation?
Yes. In fact, a lot of the times I would be outside. My mother passed away when I was 10. So I spend a lot of time outside, and part of my presentation today is some of the influences and experiences I got then. But sports became a really big part of my early years. So I ended up representing Kenya. I was the captain of the Kenya cricket team. I'm a Hall of Fame from Kenya in cricket. I played in 3 World Cups. Wow. So it was great to be out there, and there was a competitive side to it. It was all on an amateur basis. Wow. So it's not on professional. So I was still in school. I was still playing sports. So
that's really amazing and riveting, and I'd like to learn more about that part of your life. Before we go any further, though, let's talk a little bit about the young man next to you, Hirsch. And yes. He's not just up here as a witness.
Yeah. Well, Hirsch, because I've also got an academic background, and education is very important to the firm. We have a very unique internship program, which I'll discuss with you very soon. But Hirsch was an intern last year at the age of 12.
Now you're 13?
Yes.
Impressive. So every time I see you, you're wearing something different, and it's usually very colorful and textural. And can you tell us about your outfit today?
This is what they call a fugu dress, F-U-G-U. It is a dress that is worn by northern Ghanaians from Ghana. It's a dress that came from Burkina Faso, worn a lot by politicians and performers and people in the royal family. The motifs are from nature, so there's a connection to nature. It's 100% cotton. It's woven with wooden looms, and it goes from generation to generation. And there's a very interesting story about the hat, because if you wear the hat up, that means you are a chief with nobody above you. If you wear the hat on the side, that means you're from the royal family. If you wear it backwards, that means you have got followers. And if you wear it the way I've worn it, that means you are a warrior, and that means there's nobody behind you. But people call me an eco-warrior, so I decided just to put it in front.
If it's on the left side, different than on the right side?
Right, I don't know what it means. Maybe right means you're a foreigner or something.
So when you were growing up, you said it was very modest lifestyle. Yes. What were your early influencers to become a landscape architect?
Well, you know, I had a 6-year fully professional education in architecture from Nairobi University. And at that time, Frank Lloyd Wright and his organic architecture really connected with me. And then a little bit later on, the American transcendentalists like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, the naturist writers like John Muir, because of his outside. You know, this is a guy who used to walk from San Francisco to Yosemite. And so these are the guys who helped, influence me. And then later on, when I was at Berkeley doing my landscape architecture degree, met with Garrett Ekbo, Lawrence Halprin. So they've been great. And then there was Randy Hester, who's getting an award in this conference. Claire Cooper Marcus, over time, were great influences.
A lot of countries don't have a real mature landscape architecture practice, so you came to it through architecture. Is that true?
That is correct, yes. In fact, after returning back to Kenya, I was the head of the landscape architecture section at the Department of Architecture. So in Kenya, there was no program in landscape architecture, so we were teaching landscape architecture studio to students within the architecture department, and that was the way to get into it.
So let's talk a little about your passport. You probably have gotten the additional inserted section to make it even thicker.
Yeah.
It's very colorful, tattered pages. Probably catches the attention of immigration officers sometimes. And because you've been in 90 countries.
Yeah. I believe that to understand the world, you've got to travel, to be out there. And through my sports, through my work, through speaking engagements, through vacation, we have had the opportunity to be to 90 countries. But it's also gotten me into trouble. After 9/11, they mistook my name, Mehta, or they had me similar to another suspected terrorist. So for 11 months, I was on the suspected terrorist list. I was always, it made life difficult for me as I was coming in every single time. But at the same time, I felt really good because that was the only time that I was on the same list as one of my great mentors, Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
And I felt terrible that he got taken out of the list before I was. So there you are.
And on first name basis with the immigrations officers in Miami?
So. Yes.
So let's, unless you want to talk a little bit more about yourself, like your mentors, you mentioned your mentors and muses.
Well, in terms of mentors, I would say the 3 people that stood out for me, because all 3 of them believed very much in the civil disobedience and nonviolence. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and Mandela, for sure. People who believed very strongly that nonviolent approaches are the best way to go forward.
I know as a landscape architect, you try to use landscape architecture to solve issues. Have you been able to affect change in countries using these techniques?
Yes, very much so, and I plan to present some of those as we go forward, yeah.
All right, let's learn a little more about HM Design. It's, when I learned a little bit more about your firm, I was a little surprised to basically understand it's a one-person company with a lot of associated people that work for you in various countries.
Yeah, we have a very unique setup because of the fact that after the recession started, and because our practice is like 70% professional practice and 30% academic, we wanted to make sure that kept the overheads down. So set up a system where inside the studio or at the office we have in Fort Lauderdale, we work with 4 or 5 different consultants that come in and go out depending on the nature of the job and the projects. So there's nobody full time. But at any given point in time, we have what we call outside the studio consortiums, and that could be if there's a project in Galapagos, we have got a fully fledged team working there. There's a project in Dominica, there's a team there, a project in Indonesia. So those are the people, so that's our outside the studio team. But I never look at the firm as a one person, because as you will see from the presentations, HM Design could be a local community, an indigenous community in Amazon. It could be an indigenous community in Africa. And for any particular project, we are all working together. So it's a joint setup.
How do you qualify your team members in these various locations?
I still, as you said, live a modest life. I keep my BlackBerry with me, still going strong.
BlackBerry.
Yes. I still have a watch that was made in 1941 that I use. Works very well. And I keep in touch with people around the world with Skype, and it's worked well so far.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your firm philosophy, because we've heard of triple bottom line and physical. You get into quadruple bottom line and metaphysical.
Yes. Over time, realized that the triple bottom line approach does not guarantee sustainability, which is environmental, social, and financial. We learned working with indigenous communities and local communities around the world that there is a fourth aspect, the spiritual aspect, which is very important, it's very important to capture and harness the energies that are on site and make it work for your project. So that's our philosophy. We work with the whole philosophy of holism, where humans, flora, and fauna, right from day one, are on the same table at the same time. Each one of them has equal importance. So it's a holistic approach so very low impact approach to planning and design.
Can you, one of your bullet points is the spiritual energy that is embodied or flows through the site. How can you measure that?
Well, what we do is depending on what project it is and where it is and what kind of clients we have, and if that's what they've requested. We've been doing quite a few projects in southern China, which is where feng shui is really big. Mm-hmm. And you've got to use that, but we bring in feng shui masters for that. In India, there is Vastu Shastra, which is about 10,000 years old, where they've built cities and everything and towns using Vastu Shastra. So we would bring them in on that certain cases. There is, of course, the 5 senses approach, which I'll be presenting a little bit later on, that also is about how to get yourself totally connected to the spirit of the site.
Wow. Okay, so through your practice, you've been able to successfully merge about 70% professional and 30% academic.
Yeah.
And you are going to sign your book after this session?
Yes. It's not an easy thing to do. There's always challenges, but we try to do only about 5 or 6 projects a year. So that way it gives us time to work on books and research papers. So right now about finishing 2 different research papers, and we've done 3 books over the years. So that way you can keep that balance between professional side, and the academic side is always influencing the professional side of things. It's very important. Yeah.
So you cap it off at 5 projects, kind of as a goal?
Well, it varies. Sometimes there could be 7 or 8. Sometimes there's 4. It depends on what part of the project you're on. If you're in, CDs or construction supervision, it may take a lot more time. So it depends. So there's a mix of a little bit of everything. In between, we do workshops, eco-design workshops around the world. So we'll do 1-week workshops or get paid to do engagements. More recently, we are doing consultancy for National Geographic. So we go and do 1 week trips for National Geographic. So we mix and merge depending on how everything works out.
So you will spend weeks on the ground at a particular project?
There have been instances where we've spent 20 days on a project to really get to, and I'll show you 1 or 2 examples of it. Other days, minimum is about a 6 to 7 day trip, because we believe very strongly that in order to have a successful and a sustainable project, you've got to really hear and feel and see and really immerse yourself onto the site and get truly connected with it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your approach on mentorships and internships.
It's something we believe very strongly in, and I started after getting my master's. I was an associate professor at University of Nairobi, so there's a very strong academic background there. And currently, in terms of mentorship, I'm an external examiner with the only fully fledged program of landscape architecture in Africa. We organize education conferences in Africa on landscape architecture. And because the field that we are specialized in is not being taught at universities, we are constantly mentoring students from around the world doing their master's theses or undergraduate theses and helping them out. And then when it came to internships, we really felt strongly that we needed to start young. And we're going to be doing a little presentation about it. And so our internships are students between the ages of 5 and 12.
You know, people are certainly familiar with working with the flora of a site and native plants, but you also, in your bio, have a lot of animal interface projects to preserve their habitat. Do you have a zoological background?
Actually, no. I grew up in a philosophy that originated from India called Jainism, which has very heavily influenced me. There's very total respect for all kinds of species. So I come from 50 generations of vegetarians. I'm now a vegan. Mm-hmm. And so there's a total respect for all forms of living beings. And so, have over time been connected to, growing up in Kenya, you can't help be connected to animals. So I've had the opportunity to work with the protection of some of the biggest endangered species on the planet. Giant pandas and mountain gorillas and tigers in India and Galapagos sharks and chimpanzees. And so we've been fortunate and lucky to have had the chance to help protect some of the most endangered species.
So this is really more about the habitat.
Yes.
Okay.
And we make sure that we only use native or endemic species wherever we work.
So that's very sensitive. How would you measure success, especially post-occupancy?
Success. If we find, like we do in an example, the mountain gorillas, their population has been increasing every year. And as a result was because of the master plan we did. That's how we look at success. When we see the population of chimpanzees increasing, or in the case of indigenous communities, one of the projects I'll be presenting, where you begin to see their livelihoods are improving. You're beginning to see their houses are getting better, their children are going to go to school, and it's all related because of the ecology you designed. That's how I think success, that's how we would see. Or for private clients, they're making some profit, but at the same time, some of their profit is being used to trying to alleviate poverty or etc.
Is it possible to be too successful and create too much demand for tourists coming in from the outside?
With the kind of work we are doing, it's going to be a very, very long time. I think traditional tourism is going to remain. What we are doing is about only 5% of the industry right now. So,
what's the occupancy of a typical eco-lodge?
It depends where you are. Some places will be 90%, other places 70%. It also depends on how much they are charging, because in the end it is dependent on how much profit they're making and how much of that profit is being used to make a difference.
Okay, well, at this point, we're going to switch into this third section and talk a little bit about some of your case studies.
Yes. All right. Very good. So it's great to see some familiar faces. Hello, everyone. Our office is located in a 1950s Art Deco building in Fort Lauderdale in an 80-year-old neighborhood. And right from the signage outside to everything inside, it's recycled furniture, reused fittings. There's a very strong ethical side to everything that we do on the inside. And including all the artifacts, they've been bought directly from the people that make it around the world. So there's a strong connection with the people that you're working with on a daily basis. We take heed from Sean Achore's study that found that spending 20 minutes outside in good weather not only boosts positive mood, but broadened thinking and improved working memory. Because we don't want to have Alzheimer's, any opportunity we will get, we will go outside the office, have our conference sessions and meetings outside under that beautiful fig tree, which you will find has got very strong spiritual connections with people in Africa and in people in Indonesia. We'll sometimes go up on the tree, because when you are with nature and you are designing and planning, you have a different appreciation with it. You're going to respect it. A lot of our work, as we mentioned earlier, is in remote and protected areas, and working with indigenous communities and animals. So we felt the outside the studio tag for this session is a lot more appropriate, fit in better than the inside the studio. So I hope you have brought your seat belts, because I'm going to be taking you on a little tour of the planet. We've had consultancies in 60 countries, in 6 continents. So much so, some of these places are so remote that just a single trip, one-way trip, there's not enough space on the bag for the tags. And a lot of these places are so remote, there's no network, thank God. That means you don't have to have your cell phones with you. There's nothing, and there's total happiness when you detach yourself of all of these things. So I did say that we do work outside. And that means that outside could be working off trees and checking out places from there, using trees as a little bit of a support system. And this is special because it's a fig tree up in eastern Indonesia. We are taking notes here of a very unusual spiritual ceremony taking place. And our studios are temporary. They're connected with ecosystems. This is the savanna studio. This is the semi-desert studio. This is the rainforest studio. A waterfall and river studio in Costa Rica. An ocean studio. And sometimes we are brought in. It's a billiards room. But at all times, we are always ahead of the 8 ball. This was in Sri Lanka. This is on the islands of Philippines, working with the local women there. And when it gets very hot and humid, we do take a break, go out there and catch up on our reading once in a while, or hang out and meditate and rest with the sea lions as in Galapagos. So the mission of the office is that we want to take the profession of landscape architecture to the remotest parts of the planet, work with local indigenous communities, improve their livelihoods, and protect endangered or faunal species. And Gandhi is always looking down on us in front of our drawing boards, making sure that we be the change that we want to see on this planet. As Franklin Roosevelt put it, the test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, it is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. So we are looking towards the 0.001% of this planet. And what we do is we use sustainable tourism as a way to improve these livelihoods and protect these species. Within sustainable tourism, there is ecotourism, which just by its definition is fully sustainable. And then within ecotourism, you have the eco-lodge, which is the accommodation component and the most financially profitable part of it. And we came up with this definition. We have written 3 books on this subject. And the most important part today is the one in green, that eco-lodges provide a spiritual communion with nature and culture. So we're talking about alleviating poverty and improving livelihoods in islands in Indonesia, islands in Sri Lanka, islands in Colombia, and of course Africa. 21 of the 30 most poorest cities of the planet are in Africa. And we can see we have concentrated a lot of our work in that continent. So how do we figure out ways to improve the housing, their needs, like we brought in this wheelchair for this gentleman that day, their infrastructure, and most importantly, their livelihoods and how they can benefit from tourism. And one of the techniques we have used to create community empowerment is through participatory planning, bringing people from day one. So it is what we call ego-less but eco-full planning, where everybody is on the same page. Local communities, consultants, and animals and plants together as one. Not a top-down approach, but so what you do is you listen, you're at the same level with them, making sure you're taking notes right from the beginning. And when they are sitting, you sit with them. The eye level is very important. That was in Mongolia, this is in India, this is in China, this is in Congo. But if you're in the jungles of Congo, well, sometimes it gets difficult to be at eye level. So if they are standing, it gets a little tricky. These are what we call the Batwa, not the pygmies. Pygmies is a very derogatory word. The Batwa, because some of them are about 5 feet 5 inches. So, or when you are up in the jungles of Ecuador, Amazonian jungles, it's important that you have to always make that connection. Eye contact is very important. And this is Namibia. And you work with them right from the beginning. It's a to and fro process. Then you give them the pencils and the crayons and the markers. You get them to start drawing. Doesn't matter how the drawing ends up. You can always make it sexier when you go back to the office. But this is about creating empowerment. And I tell you this interesting story. This is up in northern Namibia with the Himba community. Gave them the color pencils, but they're having difficulty using the pencil. The first time in their life they'd ever used color pencils. So what I asked them to do is just use their fingers, take the ochre from their bodies that they use, and start using the ochre to color the drawings. Even the consultants, there's a capacity building going on with the local consultants and making sure that they benefit from these whole experiences. We are also using landscape architecture as a tool for conflict resolution, working in countries where the war has just taken place or whether there is still some kind of rebel activity going on. So this is a situation up in northern Sri Lanka. We're trying to work with the Tamils. In this case, this kid was 12 years old when his father was killed in the war. And we're now bringing them back in and giving him some empowerment, getting him to draw. Some of the places we go to, there's still some rebel activity, so you're surrounded by army people or by wardens with AK-47s. But this is where happiness comes. When you get all of these people who are fighting, but bringing them together on the drawing board, they're working together and creating a better life for themselves. This is up in Colombia. Another place where there's a lot of conflict going on for a while. We talked about consortium approaches and associates that we work with. We bring in all kinds of different people in consortiums, people, eco-psychologists, evolutionary anthropologists, shark biologists. But the one team I love working with are the Three Stooges. So you might say, oh, Three Stooges. Well, you know, it's actually, those are the Three Stooges. And this is a Three Stooges moment I wanted to share up in China. But don't get cheated by the way these guys look. Paul Folleros, the one in the middle, is Australia's topmost eco-architect, won an award, United Nations Habitat Award, done more work with indigenous communities in Australia than anybody else. He's a TED speaker. And the guy to the right of him is the world's best known bamboo architect. Totally egoless people. They don't have websites, sometimes very difficult to even get them on emails. The metaphysical analysis and planning is what we talked about earlier. Wherever we get the opportunity, we use the whole concept of feng shui. We bring in masters. This is a project in southern China, working with the local community and working on a project where we use the classic feng shui approach of mountains at the back, water in the front. That's the project right there. So there's water in the front, mountains at the back. And the project itself had a lot of feng shui principles used in it, where water is coming into the site, water never leaves it. So according to them, the money comes into the project. The orientations of temples, very important part, going towards the south. This temple now you can see has already been built. People are already using it. And the one that I wanted to talk about, because it's going to be coming a little bit later, is a six senses approach. I learned this initially at Berkeley, which is where no matter what project it is, you can use this technique. Go to a place, sit down, and the first thing you do is you keep your eyes open but close all your other five senses, your ears, your nose, your mouth, and jot down what is it that you see. Then you close your eyes and only keep your ears open and jot down what is it that you hear. And you do it one by one. You do it with smell. Be careful with the touch, especially if it's poison ivy. Don't touch it. You do it also with taste. Make sure you're not taking any poisonous or getting any viruses into your system. But this helps you connect with the site at a totally different level. And the last one, which is one I'll be sharing with you very soon, coming from one of the participants, is the feel, where you become part of the site. So you take out the Homo sapien ego out of you, and you become a part of the site, whether it's a butterfly or a leaf or a rock or a tree. In this case, listening to the breeze of the bamboo in a forest. And the permaculturist teacher Sarhok put it very well. We cannot intervene effectively, cannot say something back to the world unless we first understand and hear something. And we cannot hear unless we open our ears and realize that the world is speaking to us. And as soon as we do, we become more alive, more wild, more at home in a vital and dynamic universe. So these are some of the exercises being done on every single project we work on. And at certain times, depending what it is, we will go and get rid of every single possession that's on the body. So we take our natural body, so there are no clothes, no watches, no glasses, nothing. And we connect with the natural world. So this was up in Panama, at a waterfall in Panama, and this was up in Namibia, where we became the rock. And these are different techniques that are used. On some projects, we'll bring in eco-psychologists to do meditation workshops before they start doing the five senses. There's an ecologist here, eco-psychologist working with it. There's the meditation going on. Because if you look at this study of the Massachusetts General Hospital that did this 8-week study where they got people to do meditation, they found out that parts of the participants' brains associated with compassion and self-awareness, they grew. So meditation really helped. This is a study that this gentleman did. He's in fact one of the clients for this project. And this is what came out. It says, light. My eyes were cleaned by fresh breaths of widened view. Colors and movements surprised me as I could see much more from a calm perspective. The river is more beautiful and alive. It gives a sense of peace and cleanliness, washing away leaves and floating pollen in its slow green current. So some of these clients were actually, they climbed trees, they became parts of a trunk, they went into the ocean and they became a wave. And one of them became a molecule of water. And this is what came out. Because this exercise is very important. When you do the becoming the site, it is with the knowledge that development is going to be coming on this site. So when you become a butterfly, what do you feel when you know that a development is coming? Hello, I am water. I'm a small molecule that may take on many different forms. I'm vital, and without me, you could not live. And I'm the source for all living beings. I'm the source from where most mammals started. I'm the balance element that is a source of nourishment. You drink me to quench your thirst. You use me to irrigate your fields and bring you the agriculture products that feed your population. I am what marks the boundaries of your land and your countries. I am what covers most of the surface of the earth you live on. I am what makes your planet green. I am part of the cycle of life. When I get hot, I evaporate into the air and come down in rain to refresh the land in small raindrops. You people watch my every movement. You watch me on the weather hoping that I will come soon to end a dry spell or cursing my presence as I drown your people and flood your planet. I used to have more regular patterns and was more predictable with my currents and movement, but you have changed me with your developments and careless movements. You are chopping down the hills where I have nourishing springs, and you are causing the erosion that I leave behind when you destroy your nature. I'm killing the species that depend on me when I cry acid rain tears or when my clear river currents are toxic with all your waste. Now, I will destroy places where some of the poorest people live and wash away homes in my huge tsunami or flood your cities with my hurricanes. I will flip your sea vessels and your toxic oils will contaminate me. Perhaps only some of you see that I am a future long-term investment. As I become scarce, some of you will make money from me as a commodity. I will become a branded water bottle or a measured unit that will flow out of your land with the careless planning of an aqueduct, feeding your greeting community of swimming pools, golf courses, and other wasteful uses. You take me for granted until the day that you have depleted my resources, and you will have to find out what you did wrong and try to clean up the mess you have made. Please keep me in mind in your development. I am a delicate resource and I affect all life forms in life. I am a balanced element in life. So once they have done this thing, the idea is we'll put it up on the drawing board during the whole process of design. We also do a cosmology workshop. We did this to connect people to the thing. There's a very interesting clientele. 6 of the family of these clients all went to Cornell University. And when we asked them to give us feedback, they said, design is more than a one-way process, and we need to take time to listen to the land before taking irreversible steps. So I'm going to take you a little bit deeper into 2 quick case studies. To Kenya, to one of the most amazing parts of the planet. This is where over 1 million wildebeest and zebras every year in July cross the Serengeti and come into the Masai Mara. The greatest show on earth, as I found out, is not in Las Vegas, but it's actually here. And right next to, in the northern part, is this place called Naboisho. It was a ranch owned by the local Maasai. And in Kenya, and most places in the world, 70% of the wildlife lives outside the protected areas. And you can see here what the Maasai had done, that cut this whole place, 50,000 acres, into 50-acre lots of land. And the grid and the planning is like as if it was Manhattan. Here lives the Dorobo, the closest connections we have to the hunter-gatherers of our ancestors. The Maasai live off their cattle here that were totally destroying the whole landscape. And their lifestyle had not changed for almost 3, 4, 5, 10,000 years. So they wanted to make a change. So they approached a group of private operators, eco-lodge operators, and made a deal with them. And the deal was that the Maasai would leave out of that whole area, go next door, and as long as their cattle was allowed. Sorry?
Go water.
Oh yeah, I got one, yeah. And so it is at this time that, and of course they would make money from leasing the land. So they brought in our team, which is a consortium. We included one of the world's leading vulture experts, one of the world's leading small mammal experts, a vegetation expert, a hydrology expert, and we started working on this project. But I want to share with you what we experienced in the first week we were there. At the same time, I want to lower your heartbeat a little bit and meditate and immerse yourself into this landscape. It's the gestalt of Naboisho, the genius loci of Naboisho. Oh, that did not happen. Sorry. The music that's being played is from a piece of stick, a piece of bamboo. So I asked all the consultants to become shadows, because shadows don't know any ego. With shadows, there's nothing like you're more intelligent than I am, or you're more wealthy than I am, or I'm the world's leading expert. We all are at the same level with the animals and with the local communities. And we went there to listen and to totally understand their whole site with them, how they hunt, how they go about doing their daily lives. This is a sacred hill, just like with the Native Americans, a sacred hill that has a lot of medicinal plants growing on it that their ancestors have been using for millennia. Then they come on the drawing board and show us some of the very important places where they have their rituals and ceremonies. We also brought in the managers sort of the whole protected area at that time to get us to understand the infrastructural issues. And then we brought the Maasai onto the drawing board and get them to start drawing, to start empowering them right from day one, so then they begin to treat this as their own project. And the first drawings don't look that great, but they've got a lot of substance. The sacred hill has been protected. Their spiritual ceremonies places have been protected. Where they do male bonding ceremonies, that has been protected. And then you get back to the office and you start working on it. And then you develop the final, it's an integrated pastoralism, biodiversity, and tourism master plan. And the final drawing is like a Picasso painting. There are about 8 layers gone in to do this master plan. It's all hand done with then touches of Photoshop at the end. And what was interesting was that there was one of the properties there, the Base Camp Wilderness Lodge, is 100% owned and operated, owned by the Maasai themselves. So we did a site plan for them and brought in a whole new consortium team, locally based in Nairobi, architects and all kinds of engineers to work and build and redo this lodge, which appeared as one of the 25 top eco lodges in the world by National Geographic. They also have a school. We did a lot of capacity building workshops to teach them. The only indigenous community guiding school that I know of on the planet. And they are now working on that setup. And then this is the final one, going to Galapagos from there. We were asked to do a master plan and now a full project for a property up on the easternmost island of the Galapagos, where a certain Mr. Darwin first landed his beagle, his eco-friendly beagle, right somewhere here. And before we started our research, we realized that with Darwin around, you've got your work cut out. He had a lot of studies that he had done. But instead of starting in Galapagos, we actually went all the way to a place called Cuenca. It's a World Heritage UNESCO site. Because the history of Galapagos, flora and fauna, is that most of it all came from the mainland. So we wanted to try and mimic and understand what is this all going to be about. So we started with our pens and our pencils and our cameras, and we started studying the typology of the form of Cuenca. And this one in case Spanish colonial architecture. The squares, the gardens, the scales, the proportions of spaces, the different walls of the gardens, of the farms. And one by one, we started building up a little pattern. This is the pavement types. And sketching is a great way to connect with people, far better than taking photographs. So we started doing some quick studies and ideas about the lift and no touch. We studied the local indigenous, the Native American populations, went to the local museum to study ethnobiology, to study anthropology of these cultures, of their architecture and their construction techniques. And then the modern craftsmen, the best craftsmen of Ecuador come from Cuenca to see how they go about doing things, including the native peoples. And that's when we moved to Galapagos. And in Galapagos, we did a very detailed analysis of the flora and fauna and studied the iguanas and the blue-footed boobies and the gulls and the crabs. Some of these are endangered, the frigate birds, and even the patterns on the different tortoises that are all in Galapagos. Of course, you can't be doing any kind of analysis if you have not done Darwinian finches. Very important. In fact, Darwin, bless his soul, will be very happy to know that we have continued his research. This is what he did, but we found out that now there's new adaptation taking place. So that bird is going to be called the Kellogg's Puffs finch. You can see it's been eating some Kellogg's Puffs cereals, and it's going to have to adapt its beak. That's the white sugar finch. So we studied a lot of different native vegetation, especially the vegetation zone that existed at the same elevation of the site, the Miconia vegetation, which is what you see there, and trying to understand what it's all about. And you're going to find out the problem with a lot of the islands in the world, like New Zealand, Hawaii, Galapagos, they've been totally taken over by invasive species. So we wanted to learn a little bit more of the history about the culture and the nature as well. So we had community meetings to understand aspirations of the local people. What is it they want? What do they want to benefit from the project? We did a landscape as a visual resource analysis from the moment you land from the plane and you take a car. Every 5 minutes, what is the experience you get? So we did all of these studies to see how we could improve that experience as you get to the eco-lodge. And that's when you get to the site, which, as I mentioned, almost 80% of it been taken over by invasive species, the blackberry and the iguana. not iguana, sorry, the guava tree that you see at the top. So the National Park Service have got a good record of trying to eradicate the invasive species and bring back the Miconia. So we had meetings with the national parks people. We went to local nurseries to try and figure out ways about what they're doing and how it could help with the project, so we can bring back that whole Miconia ecosystem to the property and have it something similar to what you see. We did a metaphysical analysis. This is a lady from Colombia. She's using dowsers as a way to capture the energy of the places. And we used the metaphysical analysis and included it into the physical analysis, and then created a composite analysis from which we did opportunities and constraints plans. The conceptual master plan came out of it. And you can see a project like this. This is what I would call the HM Design Office team. This is all the local people, all the consultants, clients, everybody is part. This is what makes up the team. And now finally, this is just the last 1 minute. For the schematic design, we brought in, started using drones to try and understand. We mapped up the whole site with this yellow tape and tried to understand all the different axes that we had created, or borrowed landscapes that you can see with the red arrows, to try and understand the lay of the land. And then worked with a local architecture team to develop and work with the whole schematic design of the project. That's going to be the Arrival Bridge. That's the research center, the main building, lounge, etc., looking at inside-outside experiences at the same time, and how you will see the full moon at total access point with the windows. And finally, material studies. So I go now to the program of internship. And Wendell Berry, in 1971, he published a book called The Unforeseen Wilderness. He speaks of the life of a man who knows that the world is not given by his fathers, but borrowed from his children, who has undertaken to cherish it and to do it no damage, not because he is duty-bound, but because he loves the world and loves his children. So we believe, fully support that statement. We believe that children are the future of this planet, and that we need to start them young, in fact, very young. Last summer, we had interns from the ages of, 5, 7, 9, and 11. 6, 7, 10, and 12. And you can see some of them require pillows to get to the the size of the table. They start working on coloring site plans and then trying to understand how they work and what difference it makes. This guy here wanted to do a house for himself, and so designed a 2-story house. And we still get them to learn and do things outside in the garden. And you get the finished product about the connection between building and gardens. This is the 2-story, 2-bedroom house that he designed. But I would say that the most eye-opening experience I had, was that of Hirsch, who's sitting here on my left here. His parents had come to me because they were very worried about his handwriting. The teachers could not even understand his handwriting and did not mark his exams because it was illegible. So he had come to learn how to do handwriting. So I put all the alphabet at the top and got him to write down each word of the alphabet about 7, 10 times. I got some letters put down, landscape words. And then I got into a Skype conversation, a meeting across the world for about 1 hour. And at one time I looked back and I saw him working like this, and I said, great, he's doing his work. So I got out of the Skype session, went to Hirsch, and I said, Hirsch, what have you got? What have you done? So he shows me 3 pages only that he has worked on. So I said, what have you been doing? He says, I got bored. It reminded me of Bart Simpson. I got bored, and so I designed an airport. I said, oh, okay. I didn't want to give him too much attention about the airport because his exercise was the handwriting. So I first marked all the handwriting, showed him what not to do, what to do. And then I said, why don't you show me the airport? So he brings out this whole shit. In 1 hour, he's designed a full airport that includes hotels, it includes the terminals, it includes the runways, it includes the executive airport, it includes the FedEx airport, etc. So I told him, I said, this is good, but at HM Design, we only do eco projects or socially friendly projects. So you go back to the drawing board, do your research, and you come back to me. So here to present the research and the project is now 13-year-old Harsh Kabaria. Yeah, you can use that.
So I started researching eco-airports and if they even existed. Starting this, I knew that airports are normally giant structures with an equally giant carbon footprint. During research, I found some airports that had small eco-friendly aspects, but none had taken this to an idea to a level where it influenced all of the airport. I would like to show you a few of the airports I found in my research that had some of these eco-initiatives. There's this one in Galapagos. Another picture of it. A few here in the US, like Boston Logan. And one in New Delhi, which IGBC had given a gold rating on one of its terminals. As Mr. Method showed you, this is the conventional master plan showing the locations of the airport's main components. And I would like to present the plan of the main airport with all of its eco-friendly features involved. So travelers arrive through a large native forest here, and they will be greeted by eco-friendly airport billboards on the roads here, both of which I'll explain in a few minutes. There's also a very nice airport hotel within walking distance from arrivals and departures. Unlike traditional airports, we have two different arrival and departure buildings, allowing for eased traffic and simple expandability, which allow also a lower carbon footprint from waiting cars. All of this is followed by a large and fast-moving security /TSA/immigration building. So we have a circular tram here, and on the left we have international terminals, or the right is international, the left is domestic. In the center we have the World Garden, which people will be able to learn about the world and the environment. And on the bottom we have an affordable transit hotel for those who are temporarily stranded. So the hotel contains a saltwater pool, and for those who have time, there is a native plants garden and an educational museum about the history of eco-friendly design in the aerospace industry. In this garden, we have a control tower and a public viewing area. And on the right, we have a biodome array, which will be explained later. So what makes this airport eco-friendly? I would like to take you through 7 different concepts on how I did this. So this is how the forest on the main road will look like. This forest is completely native to the area and will help create a carbon positive environment. And so will be the case of the native botanical garden, which will include a constructed wetland system for sewage treatment. All of the power used by the eco-airport will be made from a solar array of these parabolic troughs. Salt will be pumped through tubes at the focal point of the troughs and then be used to heat water, which will be put into a turbine to generate electricity. So this is a billboard created by UTEC, Peru's University of Technology and Engineering, which cleans air at the same capacity of 1,200 trees. They will be deployed throughout the Eco Airport and will make sure the Eco Airport is carbon positive, all while generating revenue. So, this parking lot is constructed using tiles from the Solar Roadways project. They're mostly made of photovoltaics, allowing for these to cover most of the power generation, as it will be put in tarmac, taxiways, roads, and runways. And here's the test of the heating coils and the LEDs on the panels. And this allows for them to easily light up and melt any snow that has accumulated on tarmac without the need for big, expensive, and time-consuming snow crews, also allowing for planes to have great visibility of the runway when landing. So this is a picture of the biodomes that will be placed on the site. They will not only be part of the recreation part of the Eco Airport, but will provide quite a bit of food for any food vendors in the airport that will be fully organic and vegan. And this is another picture of what it will look like. So this is an example of the hydrogen fuel cell buses that will be used to shuffle passengers around. And they require no fossil fuels and have no carbon footprint. So this is a picture of its internals, including the fuel storage you see here at the top and a small fuel cell system down here. So this is a picture of the current electrical ground crews available at Seattle-Tacoma Airport, and we'll also be planning to use these same ground crews. And this is an all-electric truck that will be used to ferry anything around on the airport. Wrong button. So this is an above ground. There will also be an above ground rainwater and gray water system to collect water for any uses that may need it. So the whole Eco Airport will rely on materials that are safe for the environment and the people inside. These will include recycled metal and plastic, sustainable wood from FSC certified forests, natural materials including stone and clay, crushed bottle windows, recycled rubber tiles, and non-VOC and non-toxic paints. Hopefully we will see many airports like this one in the near future. Thank you for your time. Back to Mr. Mehta.
Well done, Harsh. Well done. I think you get a little window of what the future looks like. People don't have very good eye-hand coordinations, but very entrepreneurial and very creative with the way. Harsh actually has got a certificate of PowerPoint as well. So if you want any PowerPoint expertise, he can provide it. So this is a follow-up as well. This whole presentation is about nature and culture and about spiritual things. I'd like to take the words of wisdom of Chief Seattle when he handed over land to the President Pierce at that time. Teach your children what we have taught our children, that the earth is our true mother. Whatever happens to the earth happens to the children of the earth. If people spit on the ground, they spit on themselves. We know the earth does not belong to people, but people belong to the earth. We know everything is joined together in some way, like the blood that runs through a family. Whatever happens to the earth happens to the children of the earth. We do not weave the web of life. We are just a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. So to take this whole message of nature and of the spirit of the land, I'd like to do a little dance for you guys. And here I will show you this another person who did some workshops, Lawrence Halprin, about dance workshops. His wife was a dancer, and you can see he did all these amazing studies about choreography, about the dance. Well, I'm a lot more simpler and humbler. I find this very complicated. If he did a choreographic thing about my dance, I think he might get a little bit confused. So what I've done is over a 15-year period, taken photographs with special lenses of details of nature and culture as well from around the world. And you can see these some special technologies. This was just from 10 days ago, doing consultancy for National Geographic in Costa Rica. And you can see a photograph there of a snake head. You will see later a photo of what it's going to look like very soon. So I am going to get ready. And just wanted you to know that the song you're going to be hearing is from a brother of mine from Kenya, Ayub Ogada, from the same area as Mr. Obama. This song was one of the background songs for the movie Constant Gardener. And so, it is you will see some connection to spiritual practices around the world. So there's a lot of the spiritual side, there's more traditional stuff. So the song and the dance just goes with the music. There's no real thing to it. Right?
Very good, very inspiring. I haven't ever been to an ASLA panel quite like this one. So, all right, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but we want to talk about looking ahead. What are your aspirations for HM Design moving forward? Hiring Hirsch to run the program?
Well, Hirsch is already beyond his age. He can't be hired anymore. He's already turned 13. Well, at least personally, I don't believe in retirement. I'd like to work like Oscar Niemeyer and others who wrote books at the age of 101. So, but what I'd love to do, and with HM Design, is to continue spreading the good word of the profession and how it can be used to make a difference around the world. And maybe even better would be to keep on planting these seeds around the world, you know, wherever you go. So I do speak and continue to maybe do making more presentations at universities, making, you know, hopefully getting involved in like bigger projects. Hopefully the bigger tourism hotels like maybe Ritz-Carltons and Four Seasons and all of these bigger ones, this 500-room hotels begin to start looking at it this way, and that's where you could come in. So,
you know, that gets into the scale of work that I do, and I really, the six senses approach
yes.
most likely would tell you that you don't want to build anything like that on the site. So how do you justify the kind of impacts of a large-scale development with the sensitive site?
I guess in the end, it's all about balance and how you do it. I think if, with the way the technologies are available these days and the one that Hirsch did research on, you know, all these fuel cell cars, fuel cells that are coming out, I think if there is a will, anything is possible. Anything is. And it's all a matter, the idea should not be that we want to make $100 million profit. Make 70 million, but the other 30, use it to be more respectful of the environment and the local people, because that's where sustainability is. If you look at this latest issue of National Geographic, it's a whole issue just on climate change. And a lot of it is to do with development that's been going on, a lot of it is with lifestyles. So how can we create a balance?
So people around here, I don't know if you're from Chicago, if you walked around over the past couple of days, what would you call the spirituality of Lower Wacker Drive? Have you ever gotten down there?
I haven't gotten down there.
It's on the lower level, all concrete, girders,
yes.
homeless habitat.
It's, I was last week in New York, Manhattan, and there's something about concrete that just, and glass, that warmth and the feeling is just not there, you know.
Is there any hope for these kind of spaces spiritually?
That's what the conference I attended at the United Nations was about, sustainable cities and all that. And there is hope, but I think the important thing is to understand that the challenges and situations. I mean, since this presentation started, which was 50 minutes ago, 1 hour ago, 60 minutes, we have had 3 mouths come into this world every second. So, you know, in 1 minute, we've got 180 new, and the world is getting smaller and smaller. It's not getting bigger. More people are coming in. There is no other life on another planet. So we have to figure out, I think as Lovejoy just said in the National Geographic, the guy who created the term biodiversity, he says it's every single person on the planet has to do something. You know, a Gandhi is not going to solve the problem of climate change. You know, I think everybody has to do something little.
Yeah, actually it was 80 minutes ago that you started, so even more mouths to feed. Yeah. If people have questions, please go to the microphone so we can record it, but we have a few more minutes. I'm curious, who wrote the I am a water molecule? Did that come out of one of your sessions?
If you saw that first slide, there was a lady laying on the water. Mm-hmm. It was written by the client.
And she did that?
She did that whole thing.
Doing the six senses experience.
Six senses experience. And that was just what came out of the 6 senses from the river. But they did one for the forest, there's a nature connection. They did one at nighttime for the cosmology, and they did one for the ocean. So for each one of them, they became something. So the same lady became a molecule of water in the river, but she became maybe a wave in the ocean, or she became a butterfly of the forest.
That was beautiful. Ma'am, do you have a question?
Hello, hello. Thank you. I've enjoyed this. I have a question for Hirsch. Would you look at your airport as another phase and tell us what you would do with the cars that you have only directed but not parked and done anything with? You might come up with some creative ideas.
Do you mean a creative, for example, an automobile by itself, or the roadway system as a whole?
I'm talking about the fact that we are much more car-oriented community. Those cars park somewhere. They take up space. It's not green space, and that's another. How do we deal with cars, roads, parking in this new way of looking at things?
I would say working with the areas that we have, the areas that we have developed. For example, abandoned buildings and other large concrete structures. Instead of tearing them down and building parking lots in that area, we take the original buildings that we have, skyscrapers and other things, and we turn them into large-scale parking lots. Ones with maybe either green space at the top or solar panels at the top to help harvest energy and plants while providing parking for the surrounding areas in the lower levels.
He's thinking holistically. Great.
So, Hitesh, when you talk about measuring sustainability, how do you feel about LEED programs, sites, initiatives, or BREEAM, or other international metrics?
Do you have a day? I was actually initially involved with LEED because of my architecture background way back in San Diego, 1996. They'd already done the LEED program initial, and they were testing it with us, and we told them that it was too strict, that they would not even get one building going. But over time I realized, and I've done research on this around the world, I've got a paper that's been published in a book about certification. I found that there is not one single certification program that's been really looking at details of the pre-planning and pre-design stages, at least in the hospitality industry. And especially with the local communities and all that. So that's why over the last 10, 15 years, been working on a criteria system for eco-lodges that connects, it's a more holistic approach. LEED, this whole thing about 500 miles and everything, a lot of the places we work in, they're in islands around the world. It's so difficult to make things work. So I think each for their own. Singapore have come up with their own, which is related to tropical climates, because LEED from here doesn't work for them. India has come up with their own. I think people are trying to use their whatever works for them in their places.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. First of all, Hirsch, you're so talented. Good job. And Hitesh, I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm a senior, graduating senior, and my capstone project is actually an eco-lodge in Ecuador. And I've been doing a lot of research, but I keep coming into problems. It's a very delicate line of work, very tricky. And I just want to know, how would you make it so that the community sees the revenue, like all of the, because some governments are very tricky to work with. How do you make sure that the community gets that revenue and gets the empowerment? And I mean, you showed a little bit of the empowerment, but the financial aspect of it, how do you deal with it?
There are quite a few ways that is done. One of the best examples I've seen is the project I presented in Kenya with the Maasai community. Kenya was the first country in the world to have mobile banking, cell phone to cell phone banking. So all of those Maasai have cell phones, they all have bank accounts, and at the end of the month, whether tourists come or not, they've got a guaranteed money for every single bed going into their bank account. So there is no middleman, there are no politicians involved, and it goes directly. So that was a great way to do it. You might want to study the project called the Huaorani Eco Lodge. You may have come across it in Ecuador. That won this year the top award by National Geographic. And that's a great example. I'll be happy to connect you with the owners and the people who run it, that you can use them as a way and find out how they're doing the distribution of the whatever comes in.
Thank you.
You know, the concept of local empowerment through participatory planning, and the use of local indigenous wisdom, I think is particularly unique. Can you just talk a little bit more about how we saw a lot of images of you engaging with the local.
I think the first thing to do, whether you are an eco-tourist traveling to some part of the world, or you're working on these kinds of projects, it's very important to do your research, understand the country, understand the do's and don'ts of doing business. As you know, 2 years ago, we did the presentation on international practice.
Right.
And there are books out there for a lot of countries where you can learn all of these things before you go there. And then learn some of the words, important words of the local culture, because when local people know that you're making an attempt, they will be a lot more warmer to you. And always go with a total humble approach. None of this like, I'm the best out there, I've been working for 20 years, I know what to do, let me show you how to do it.
So you don't put your hat up?
Yeah, I don't put my hat somewhere, exactly. Yeah. And be very gentle about everything that you do. There are some countries where forget even thinking about bringing women into the picture, like Saudi Arabia. They might take it in a very bad way. You can try sometimes, but it may not work out. But generally, if you are nice to go with a very positive energy. In the end, it's all about positive energy. And you begin to get them to understand that you are there first to listen to them. You tell them that they know more about this place than you do, and that you first come to learn from them and their words of advice and wisdom. And then you take that and you marry it with your international experience and educational background, and then it becomes a marriage. And I think people really enjoy that. And you do a little bit of dancing with them. Dancing always helps, you know.
That could have been a very short answer. Just do some dancing. Yes, we have time for one more question.
Actually, it's not a question. I just wanted to say thank you to the whole panel for bringing in the spiritual aspect, the energy, and even the sacred aspect to what we do. I'm grateful.
Thank you.
Do you have any closing wisdom?
The wisdom is with the local indigenous communities. I don't have it. No, I think I believe very strongly, having traveled around the world many times, that our profession is very crucial as we go forward with humanity, with the whole issues we are facing with climate change. They are real, that's for sure. I see them on a daily basis. It's not something concocted by some scientists up there. And I've said this before at ASLA meetings, a lot of what I see in landscape architecture is not stewardship. I think, we start with this big philosophy and thing with ASLA that we are stewards of the land. But when I see work of landscape architects, you go to the Caribbean, which is very close to where I am. You go to Miami, and you go to all of these places. You go to Dubai, and you go to Cancun, and you see what landscape architects are doing, and you're thinking, wait, we are supposed to be stewards of the land. We are not connecting ourselves to the land before we start working. I think the financial side is a little bit too strong. I think if we can get the balance right, I think that's what I would say.
I think we should give Hirsch the final word.
Yes.
So,
say whatever you want.
It's a live microphone.
thank you. I guess make sure what you do to the land is not harmful. Make sure you work with the land. If you do something to it, make sure that you do something else to make it better. If you want to build something somewhere, make sure that anything you have to move, have to destroy in that building is replenished somewhere else, hopefully in an area which is almost exactly like where you started the project.
Well, that's where the wisdom is.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.